Hey there, everybody. Brian King here. Welcome to another fun-filled episode of The Mindset King. And the person I have for you today, I want you to really strap in and pay attention because her story is extraordinary. And when you hear it, according to my coach who introduced me to her, she said, "Man, it really makes you feel lazy when you hear her story. You feel like you're really slacking off because the things that she has endured, the things that she has, I don't even want to say overcome, but learned to manage, make peace with in order to live her life are just amazing." And I want to get into this as soon as possible. So welcome, Jennifer Harshman, to the show. I really appreciate you coming on to your first ever live interview, right?
My first Facebook Live ever, yes.
Okay. Well, we're going to make it as painless as possible. But then again, having to deal with me, it might be a little painful, but we will see. I will do my best. So first, give us a little professional background. What is it that you do for people?
I am a writing and publishing expert, and I serve entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, leaders, communicators, subject matter experts, independent authors, and publishers. And I help them to take the ideas that are in their minds and bring them out into written form and to get that out into the world where it can do more good.
What you do in and of itself is beautiful because there are so many people with powerful stories to tell, but they're not storytellers. They have a hard time getting it out. I remember when I was first writing my books, it was a mishmash of essays and concepts and ideas. And I was fortunate enough to find a very patient editor with an endless supply of red ink who was telling me, this is repetitive, get rid of this, or take this and move it up here, or expand upon this. And the editing process is what made me an articulate author. Fortunately, I've come a long way with my ability to communicate since then, because we're talking 1999. But having people like you who can validate the fact that you don't have to be able to necessarily connect the dots in order to have something valuable to say. You just need to be able to work with somebody who can help you do that. And you provide that gift for people. So pay attention to that alone, people, because chances are you have a story that's incredibly compelling and can inspire the masses if you can only get it together. And Jennifer is the one to help you do that. Now, with that in mind, let's get into Jennifer's story, which begins with an unbelievable childhood. So Jen, what would you like to share about that?
Well, I could probably start off by saying that my abuse began while I was still in the womb. My mother and my first stepfather had tried multiple times to abort me, and it just didn't work. I just kind of clung to life, and I was born despite it all, and then lived through a lot of stuff that, as one of my spiritual leaders from a few years ago had said about me, I deserve my own Lifetime movie because of all of the things that I survived as a child. So if you can imagine it, and probably some things that you can't imagine, I lived through that as a child and teenager. So all of the different types of physical, mental, emotional, verbal, and sexual abuse.
Just so you know, I just had a little life moment. Somebody came and rang my doorbell and my dogs lost it. So I had to hit the mute button, and they're starting to quiet a little bit. Puppies. What you just said is incredible. I mean, who can imagine the fact that something like that even exists, let alone somebody being raised in that? So how do you get out of that kind of a culture?
Claw your way out, usually. Sometimes there are people and community organizations and other types of resources available. And if they are, then that's wonderful. If they're not, then you just keep going. And there were times that I actually didn't want to keep going. I actually tried to commit suicide 3 times when I was 12 years old because it seemed like there was just no end to it. And it didn't matter how many people I told, nothing actually came of it. And I broke the rules in an abusive family, in a narcissistic system. The rule is we don't talk about it. You don't ever tell people what's going on. And I never obeyed that rule. I told every teacher, I told every doctor, I told a policeman on the corner. I might as well have been standing in the town square with a megaphone because I told everyone. But my family was a little bit connected in the small town where we were, and they had some larger connections throughout the area politically. And so it didn't matter who I told, my abusers were untouchable.
That is beyond disgraceful. So that's a situation where you not only have to get out of the family, you need to get out of the vicinity.
Yes.
So is that something you were able to do? Are you now some different location?
I am hundreds of miles away. Yeah.
And outside, and hopefully some kind of a wall and barbed wire fence around you too, for crying out loud. Do you have any communication with any of these people, family?
My mother died a few years ago. So before that, I had been no contact for several years. Just last year, I believe, my youngest sister, who, she and I have 10 years between us, she really wasn't aware of anything that was going on and definitely wasn't part of it. She got back in touch with me, and we still haven't talked about, that the elephant in the room, because she and I had very different childhoods, even though we were in the same home part of the time. But my uncle and one of my cousins I've been in contact with all along. They were never abusive to me. They've always been kind and loving. So I do have contact with some of my family members and always maintained that. But with others, I broke it off mostly for the safety of my children, because my children were starting to be targeted by those family members. And I just laid down the law, put my foot down. I said, this is not going to happen with my kids. I will protect them at all costs. So it cost me my family at that point.
It cost you your family.
To save my family.
To save your family. That's what I was looking for right there. It cost you your family to save your family.
Mm-hmm.
And to have people that were supposed to raise you, love you, protect you, nurture you,
Mm-hmm.
instead they preyed upon you.
Mm-hmm.
And then they began preying upon your own children. How does something like this impact the quality of your own intimate relationships once you're able to get beyond that, bond with obviously the father of your children? How did that work itself out? I don't imagine that you were able to just cut off the impact of that upbringing and have a utopian relationship with the opposite sex.
Right. It was definitely difficult. And I went through probably 15 years worth of therapy in different situations, different types of therapies. I read every self-help book I could get my hands on, every relationship book I could get my hands on, because I had to basically replace my entire worldview. And it is insidious, the messages that come from that kind of an environment, even if they're not directly spoken or directly transmitted in a way that you can understand consciously, it still affects everything. And when I was dating my husband, about 6 months in, I got very nervous and started to have anxiety attacks. And I talked with my therapist and I said, okay, I don't know what to do. I've never really gotten beyond this point. And, people always abandon me, but he knows everything about me and he hasn't abandoned me. What do I do? And she goes, well, what kind of things do you do when you get together and spend time together? And so, I listed off some things and she said, you just keep doing that. You keep doing those things. And I said, okay, this is just so strange because whenever you turn on a faucet, water comes out, right? And it flows down toward the earth, goes down the drain, and you expect that. And so in my relationships, I'd start a relationship, I'd turn the faucet on, water would come out, and it would go down the drain. The relationship went down the drain over and over. And I think a lot of that was because I didn't know how to navigate things. I didn't know how to relate to people. And as someone who grew up with some autistic traits and with all of the abuse and no teaching on social skills, it was really challenging for me to learn all of those things. So with this therapist, I said, okay, I turn on the faucet, but the water isn't coming out. It's not water, it's Kool-Aid. And it doesn't flow down the drain. It shoots up and splatters all over my ceiling. What do I do with this? And that was that new relationship. It was completely world changing for me, completely different. And it took some getting used to.
And I imagine within that, there was also the willingness to trust someone.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you do that when the people around you basically taught you, Jennifer, it is your responsibility to be an object.
Mm-hmm.
You are here for the use of the adults around you. Your needs are irrelevant if they exist at all.
Mm-hmm.
And you weren't taught how to exist in a reciprocal relationship, especially not a healthy one.
Right.
And now as an adult, you're saying, there's something inside me that gives me an idea of how it's supposed to be. Was there anybody around you? You mentioned that your cousin,
Mm-hmm.
and your uncle that were always good to you. Were there those little instances of healthy relationships that gave you that point of reference of how it could be?
Mm-hmm. And this may sound comical, but a lot of it I got through television sitcoms. I would see the relationships occurring between the married couples on TV shows, and the ones that seemed to be kind to each other and the ones that seemed to work well. And then there were also several that were in my church and some next door neighbors and things like that in different places that I lived. So my role models were just those little snippets of things that I could see, because so much is behind closed doors and I wasn't allowed to spend a lot of time with other people. So I had to take what I could, where and when I could.
Please share which sitcoms you found inspiration through.
I remember watching, like, I think 80s, Family Ties and The Cosbys. Goodness.
Those are definitely two examples of where they did their best to portray healthier relationships.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So they were comical but supportive, and you could tell that they loved each other. So that was what they were trying to portray. So
and there were always those teachable moments that they
mm-hmm.
emphasized when their kids were going through the life stuff. So that actual people gave you that point of reference for, okay, this is what it can be like.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel worthy enough to go out and seek this for myself. Mm-hmm. When there are some people that can be drowning in so much shame that they just feel like a worthless piece of garbage that isn't worth the time of day, and they don't even consider it an option for themselves. Mm-hmm. But you had enough self-respect and self-worth to say, I want this for me.
One of the things that I think helped me a lot is pretty uncommon too. Most people do feel that shame and that self-blame. They believe it's their fault. And for whatever reason, I never bought that lie. I knew that what was happening to me was wrong, and I knew that I had not caused it. I thought of, well, what if only I could X, Y, or Z, maybe I could change it. So I felt that the onus was on me to make the changes, but I didn't think that it was my fault or that I had done something to cause it. And that makes such a huge difference, because that's, an entire weight that I was not carrying around that a lot of other people are.
And that distinction alone is huge. Realizing that now this is different, because there's the term victim needs to be used very delicately. Mm-hmm. Because there's the victim in that it was done to me because I'm bad, I'm defective, as opposed to something was done to me, but not because of me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the latter that has the greater opportunity for you to be empowered in how you approach that. Like you said, it's not your fault. You're not responsible. It happened to me, but I have options to not let it define me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say that it's not going to have an impact. Clearly it does, but it's not going to define the entirety of who I am and how I see my worth in the world. And that's what you did.
Mm-hmm.
You defined it in a very powerful way. Then you found Mr. You want to call him Mr. Right or Mr. Good enough at the moment or Mr. Let's give this a shot? You know what?
Well, I'm not really sure. At the time, I thought Mr. Right, Mr. Exactly what I needed. And he did help me through a lot of things and help me to grow a lot. I have changed so much since we got together 18 years ago. I left him a few months ago, however, because I had come to realize that even though our relationship was so much better than anything I had ever had before, it was also abusive. So the more that I learned and would grow, the more that I would see things that still didn't line up with the ideal and still things that I deserved better. And my children, again, to protect my children deserved better. So once I got my business to the point where I was able to be self-sufficient, and that has been difficult because I have that list of disabilities. So working at home was my only option. And my children are at home with me because I homeschool them. So that gave me a very specific set of circumstances within which to work and to build a business. And I finally got it to the point where it was viable enough to support my children completely without any outside help. And once I knew that we could survive, because when a woman is in a situation, especially with children, and the finances are lacking, that fear of not being able to make it, that fear of what's going to happen, I'm going to be homeless with my children, it's huge. And that held me back for quite a while. Once I got my ducks in a row, then when another instance occurred, I took the children, we went to a domestic violence shelter and were immediately accepted, went through that, and I got the money together for purchasing a lease on this apartment and getting all of the utilities deposits together and all of that stuff. And then we moved into our own home.
Holy cow. And this is just in the past couple months.
Yes. Yeah. We were there for less than 30 days. So one of the director there told me that I was the most motivated person that they had ever dealt with, that they did not expect me to be, go from one home through them and onto my own place nearly as fast as I did. But I was very motivated to get my kids into a safe and stable home.
In my undergrad studies in social work, we had to do an internship. And my internship was in an area domestic violence shelter. And I heard a lot of the stories of the people coming through there. And so many of them, it was like they were moving into a situation where they fully expected to be rescued and taken care of. And they didn't have that sense of empowerment that you described. So what is it about you or your beliefs that allowed you to approach it in that way?
I've always been pretty headstrong and motivated. I was a good student and I was working 2 and 3 jobs, and that's just been my makeup for the longest time, as long as I can remember. So I've never really expected anyone to rescue me or to take care of me. And that probably is directly attributable to the way that I grew up. I had to fend for myself. I always was in a hostile environment. So if I needed something, I had to find a way to get it myself. So I'm pretty self-reliant in that way. Although I realize the interdependence of people and that relationships are really important and things like that. But I was not about to sit around for 6 months in a shelter and just wait for something good to happen or whatever. I was going to make it happen.
Hallelujah. So how are the kids? Well, how old are your kids, first of all?
I have 16, 15, and 10, boy, girl, boy. And my oldest graduated high school already and has been working a full-time job since just after his birthday. So he's pretty independent and
Gee,
doing
wonder where you got that from.
And then my daughter, she's also very independent.
I'm noticing a trend.
Also sassy. So there are times that she and I butt heads, but we definitely love each other very much. She is doing driving school right now at a local private school, but homeschooling the other things and doing well. She's also on track to graduate at 16. And then my youngest is 10, and he is just above grade level. He hasn't decided whether or not he wants to really apply himself and graduate early or whether he wants to just follow the traditional track. But they're all doing very well.
Homeschooling kids tends to help them go ahead faster. So you've left a marriage where there was abuse. You did it within 30 days. You've got your own place that you paid for the lease. You're homeschooling your kids. You're running your own business. Mm-hmm. Can I get a shot of whatever it is you're taking?
Evening routine, morning routine, and I plan my day and just try to get things done as efficiently as I can. Anyone can have what I'm taking. That's the thing. It's available to anyone. It all happens up in here. So whatever physical disabilities we're dealing with, whatever medical problems, whatever that might be, so much of it. And I have diabetes, ADHD, autism, fibromyalgia, neuropathy. Up until just a couple of days ago, I had 30 years long chronic gut issues. So if I can do this, you can. You know what I mean? It's not like there's anything special about me. There's not. I'm just another person. So it's just a matter of telling yourself the right things and asking yourself the right questions and planning things out and doing, breaking it down into steps to make it manageable, and then just take one step at a time. And there will be some setbacks. I never in a million years would have imagined that I would have been leaving my husband because he was abusive. I wouldn't have figured that, but that's the way it turned out. And so many different things that I would not have planned for, but that's the way it went. And you just work with what you have and you do the best you can. And you can do so much that you just would not believe. You would amaze yourself.
What you described so beautifully just now is mindset. So when you think of skill set, and for some reason the kitchen metaphor comes to mind, you've got a knife set, to handle every different cutting arrangement, a set of spoons, whatever. And your mindset is that arrangement of beliefs, habits, attitudes that determine what options you think you have, what problems you feel capable of solving, what actions you're going to take. And this is not positive thinking. Positive thinking is very passive. So everything is going to work out, everything's going to be fine. And that's just expecting things to fall into place on their own. Whereas mindset is all about, this is what I believe. This is the actions I'm going to take. These are the results I'm absolutely committed to achieving. And like you said, when you have all of these different challenges, as I do as well, when you are determined to get a result and you are determined to do it within the unique circumstances you find yourself health-wise, it requires you to be resourceful in a way you may not otherwise consider. Because you said, darn it, I'm going to make this happen. And look at everything you're doing. And as a single mom to boot. But one of the greatest takeaways from the conversation with Jen, and there are so many, thank you, your cup runneth over in terms of courage and determination, wherewithal. I mean, there aren't enough adjectives to describe you, Jen, seriously. But the biggest takeaway is, in my mind, just simply commit yourself to finding the beliefs that you can then leverage into action that allows you to be successful regardless of how difficult your life is.
Mhm.
If you're making an excuse about something, that's fear. It's the absence of a vision to see through that, whatever that resistance is. And if you don't know how to find your way out, talk about the challenge you're having. I was having a conversation with somebody on Instagram this morning about a post that I made. And she said, well, sometimes parents don't know where to look for resources. Well, that isn't the problem. The problem is that they stop. Say, oh, I don't know where to look. Well, I guess just nothing exists.
Right.
And that's clearly baloney. If there is a question to be asked, there's also an answer to be had, but you have got to insist upon continuing to ask until you find a solution that you can use. And if you happen to leave this world without ever getting the question answered, maybe you can pass it on to someone else. Einstein had a lot of theories that he couldn't prove whether it was true or not, but he kept asking the question, and guess what happened? Technology advanced itself, and the people that came after him were able to test some of his theories and say, holy cow, the guy was right. So keep asking the question. I don't want to put you on the spot because you've already given us so much gold, Jen, but is there anything, a stone that we haven't turned over, something left that you want to share with us?
Well, when you were talking just a moment ago about people giving up because they say, I don't know the answer to this, it made me think of conversations that I've had with my kids when they would do that type of thing. And their mindset for the longest time was of perfectionism and the fear of making any mistake or getting anything wrong. And they were in the public school system for the first few years. And I think part of that, being in the classroom and wanting to get the right answer, I think that kind of contributed to that. So it's taken a lot of time to unlearn or reteach the way of thinking and the way of being willing to try something, just, try whatever it is. And I tell them the first time somebody does something, they're not perfect at it. They're probably not even any good at it. They probably stink. The first time you tried to take a step, you fell. And you scraped with my oldest, he scraped his chin. So, said you fell and you bumped your chin, you got a little scrape, but you got up and you did it again. And if we have the determination or stubbornness or, fill in the blank with your adjective of choice of a baby who's learning how to walk, if we give ourselves permission to be a learner, and if we give ourselves permission to just try something and see what happens and not be worried about whether someone might judge us or whether that voice in our head might, give us a lecture or whatever it is, then that opens up a world of possibilities that we would otherwise keep ourselves closed off to.
The power of being a lifelong student and embracing discovery.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful thing. I so agree. That's why we get to go along so well.
Mm-hmm.
So I know darn well people are going to want to follow your journey because you're just so amazing. Is there a website or a Facebook page, or what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Facebook is probably the best. I usually keep my Facebook tab open most of the time. So messages or anything like that come in, I'm seeing them pretty soon. And it's facebook.com/Jennifer Harshman. And then my email is jennifer@harshmanservices.com. And Harshman Services is the website that I run where I manage a team of editors and other author service providers. So either one of those, email or Facebook, would be a pretty good way to reach me.
Outstanding. Jennifer, thank you for sharing your mind-blowing, inspirational, and compelling story with us. It's generous of you to do that. It's courageous of you to put this out there and in some way, hopefully give voice and courage to people who have endured something very similar to yours, so that they realize they're not alone and that they have a compassionate, friendly person in you that they could turn to help tell their story. So bless you for putting it out there.
Thank you for having me.
It's been an absolute honor. And everybody who's been watching, thank you so much. Please give love to Jennifer, follow her, support her in everything she's doing. And if you can utilize her services to help tell your story, please take advantage of her brilliance in that area as well. Until next time, this has been Brian. Thank you for watching The Mindset King. And until next time, thanks for being you.